The grip test machine made a sound like a kettle losing an argument with itself, and then it went dark. I let go of the handle and stepped back. The drill assessment officer behind the intake desk tapped the display screen twice with one broad finger. It stayed dark. He tapped it again, waited, and then picked up his stylus and wrote something in the log. He crossed it out and wrote something considerably shorter. "Corporal Voss," he said. "Sir." "Earth origin, Harlan County, North American sector." "Yes, sir." He looked at me, at the machine, at me again. He made a final notation in the log and did not share it. I had a feeling the notation contained the word monitor and possibly the word immediately. 3 minutes on station Korath 7, already breaking equipment. My recruiting officer back on Earth had held out his hand at departure and said, "Try not to break anything up there, Mara." He had said it as a joke. I had received it as an instruction, and I was already failing, and I had barely been on the station long enough for the airlock to cycle behind me. Station Korath 7 held a fixed orbital position at the edge of the Korath system, a structure engineered with the kind of thoroughness that makes a place feel decided. The air carried no smell. The temperature held at a species-adjusted average that was technically comfortable for all residents and perfectly comfortable for none. The gravity ran at 0.9 standard, which meant I spent the first hour in the orientation bay slightly overshooting every surface I committed my weight to, like a person who had spent their entire life walking on something that pushed back and was now required to walk on something that simply existed without opinions about it. I checked my bootlaces, left then right, tight enough to feel the pressure in my instep. I was 22 years old, from Harlan County, Kentucky, Earth origin, assigned to Joint Interspecies Military Academy Station Korath 7 under the Advanced Combat Integration Program. The formal assignment letter had used phrases like exceptional cross-species tactical assessment value and high-tolerance operational candidate. My recruiting officer had summarized it differently. He had said, "Mara, you are unusually difficult to discourage, and the program needs that." Also, the grip machine incident from last cycle's assessment has been officially classified as equipment failure. Officially. The orientation bay held recruits from 8 species and the collective performance of everyone pretending to be less unsettled than they were. I inventoried them the way my grandfather had taught me to inventory terrain before entering it. Not judgment, just assessment. Look at what is there. Understand it. Decide what to do about it. The Velhari were easy to find. 7 feet tall, with crystalline exoskeletons that broke the facilities overhead, lighting into colors that had no business existing in a government building. They positioned themselves near the east wall, with the structural confidence of things that had never once questioned whether the floor beneath them could hold. The one standing slightly apart from the others was named Shenvareth. I knew this because the intake officer called his name first on the roll, and because he stepped forward with the unhurried certainty of something that had never been surprised by the ground. He was broad across the thoracic plating, thick through the shoulder line, and when he shifted his weight to receive the roll call position, he led with his left shoulder. I noted this, stored it. The Drell recruits occupied the front rows near the water dispensers. Short and dense in the compressed way of heavy gravity origin, 3-hearted, leather-skinned, bone-pressed by a world that had opinions about what shape it approved of. They moved through 0.9 standard gravity with the deliberate care of people accustomed to more weight and not fully prepared to trust the reduction. I understood this completely, and for the precisely opposite reason. The S-Saveth were 5, clustered near the intake desk, having a conversation I could not hear. No mouths moving. Heads tilted toward each other at matched angles, communicating in a frequency range below what my ears could register. When I crossed the room past them, all 5 turned to look at me at the exact same instant, with the synchronized precision of a single organism checking a single point of interest. Then away together in the same instant. I checked my laces again. A species I had no name for occupied the far corner, small and sharp-eyed, with wide flat irises that moved independently of each other, each eye tracking a separate sector of the room at all times. Two Torvali stood along the far wall, gray-skinned and broad-shouldered, Origin World listed in the intake materials as Class 4 hostile biosphere. The materials used this classification without ceremony, the way you note altitude on a topographic map. What the classification meant, in practical terms, was that the planet their species came from occupied the same ecological threat tier as Earth, that it had spent a very long time producing things capable of surviving it, that everything which survived it had been shaped into something the universe generally declined to argue with. I had read that on the transport. I read it twice. One of the Torvali was watching me from across the room, steady, direct. I looked back. She did not look away. Neither did I. Something moved in the air between us that I did not have a word for. I moved on. The dormitory assigned me to bunk with Resketh, a S-Saveth, third of 7 pack born, from a homeworld where individual survival was a collaborative project and loneliness was treated as a condition requiring intervention. She arranged her belongings with the precise economy of someone who had always shared space and understood what that sharing required. I placed my gear near the door, close enough to reach in the dark without thinking. She noticed. She made no comment. That evening I sat on my bunk and opened a message draft I had started on the transport. 3 lines not sent, addressed to the general concept of home. I added, "The air here has no weight. I keep waiting for it to push back and it does not. Everything on this station adjusts itself to you. The temperature, the light." I have not decided yet if that is impressive, or if it is the most quietly wrong thing I have encountered in a long time. And I grew up in a place where wrong was just part of the landscape. I read it back, deleted everything after pushback. Left, "The air here has no weight." I closed the draft. Resketh's voice came from across the room, directed precisely at me in the single target tone her species used for private communication. "What are you afraid of?" Pack greeting, cultural courtesy. The prep materials had been clear about this. Her people opened new relationships with that question the way humans opened them with a handshake, a declaration that the other person had an interior life worth acknowledging. It was warmth in the specific shape her culture had learned to give warmth. I gave it the genuine answer anyway. "Getting slow," I said. Resketh went still, not uncomfortable still, the heavy still of active processing. She turned toward the wall and did not speak again that evening. I assumed I had answered wrongly. I found out much later that I had answered with perfect accuracy, and that perfect accuracy was exactly what had unsettled her. She had been revising a category, replacing an assumption with something larger and less predictable than what the assumption had contained. I turned off the light. I lay in 0.9 gravity and listened to the station breathing through its filtered vents, perfectly calibrated and entirely without weather, and I missed mornings where the fog sat in the hollows and the cold had an edge to it that told you exactly where you stood. I checked my laces one more time in the dark. Left, right, fine. They were always fine. That was never actually what I was checking. Commander Areth ran the morning orientation briefing like a controlled burn. Everything non-essential cleared away. The important things left standing where they were. She was Drell, 8 combat cycles into a career that had moved through 3 contested sectors and 2 interspecies conflict zones, and she stood at the front of the briefing room with a single tablet on the desk that she did not consult once during the briefing's 40 minutes. She had given this briefing enough times that it lived in her body, rather than in the document. She looked at me once, early in the briefing. I felt the recording happen. She looked away and continued. The briefing covered station protocols, interspecies communication standards, de-escalation resources, the structure of the 12-week program, and the Academy's formal position on cross-species combat readiness, which was, variation is real, variation is valid, and variation is the entire point of the program. She delivered everything at an identical pace, without tonal emphasis, which meant nothing was decoration and everything was load-bearing. At the end, you have been selected because your species produces individuals capable of functioning under conditions that impair most, What you do with that is the question this program exists to answer." She looked at the room. "Sparring evaluations begin in 3 days. Prepare accordingly." She left. I wrote it in my notes, "Prepare accordingly." I underlined it once. Owen, sitting beside me, had arrived at Station Korath 7 with 3 notebooks and the focused attention of someone who understood preparation as a form of respect. He was from the Oregon coast, broad-shouldered and even-tempered, and he had been watching me since the transport with the careful awareness of a person who has noticed something and is still deciding what to do with the noticing. He looked at my note. "That's a standard command sign-off," he said. "I know," I said. He waited. "I find it useful to write down things I intend to do," I said. He looked at the underline. He looked at me. He made a small mark in his own notebook that I did not ask about. The first group conditioning run was on the 3rd level track, 800 meters, paced to the Drell average rate. I ran the required laps and kept running because no one said stop. Owen finished his laps and stood in the infield watching me on lap 6 with the expression of a person quietly updating a model. He fell in beside me on lap 7. "Nobody told you to stop," he said. "Nobody told me to stop," I said. We ran in silence for 2 laps. On lap 9 he said, "What's it actually like where you're from?" I thought about the ridge lines in early October, the fog in the hollows, the specific cold that had texture to it and meant something. "The hills do not wait for you to be ready," I said. He processed this for half a lap. "This station waits for you," he said. "I know. I am not sure that is going to suit you," he said. "Probably not," I said. We finished the run. I checked my laces. 3 days until evaluations. The order had been given. I had written it down and underlined it, and I had meant it when I wrote it. The briefing room for sparring assignment announcements smelled like 7 species working very hard at professional calm, which produced its own specific tension. The way a room full of people all trying not to think about the same thing ends up being entirely about that thing. I sat in the 3rd row. Owen sat beside me with his notebook open. The Velhari arranged themselves against the far wall with the composed certainty of things that had never needed to arrange themselves differently. The Drell occupied the front rows. The S-Savith cluster had gone into their synchronized stillness, which I had started to read as their version of collective breath-holding. Commander Orith came in at the exact scheduled minute, 1 tablet on the desk. She did not look at it. She reviewed the rules of engagement for mixed-species sparring, standard protocols, developed over 4 decades and roughly 11 incidents serious enough to require the development of said protocols. Approved contact zones mapped to each species' registered anatomy, force limiter pads on all gear, the 3-point tap-out system, mandatory and binding, medical personnel stationed at ringside. Evaluation criteria across 5 categories: adaptability, technique, response time, yield recognition, and what the formal document called operational composure, which was the certified way of saying please do not come apart in front of everyone. Assignments were given pair by pair. Corporal Voss paired with senior recruit Shenvareth. Shenvareth, at the far wall, turned his head approximately 2 degrees in my direction. No change of expression. He was registering the assignment with the careful neutrality of someone who had reviewed my file and had already formed a strategy. I had reviewed his file too, 3 combat cycles, certified across 4 Velhari fighting disciplines. Exoskeleton rated for impact resistance at a level expressed in a unit of measurement I had to look up. When I looked it up, I sat with the number for a moment and then noted on a separate line the left shoulder lead. "Good luck," Owen said quietly. "With what?" I said. He looked at me, he looked at his notebook, he made a small mark. Commander Orith let the room absorb its assignments. She gave the silence the same weight she gave everything, which was enough. Then she spoke. I would learn later, from Owen and from an overheard conversation between 2 Drell aides in the East Corridor, that this closing statement was a ritual, that she gave it before every first sparring evaluation, that she had given it at the start of every integration class she had commanded, that recruits from 8 species, across 8 different cultural and psychological frameworks, had all received it and all understood it in the same way. As encouragement, as theater, as the formal declaration that real-world politeness could be set aside for the duration. She said, "You will show no mercy, not to your opponent, not to your own limits, not to your fear. The first one who holds back is not failing the match. They are failing the training. You came here to learn what you are made of. That answer does not come from comfort. Is that understood?" Nods around the room, 8 species performing the ritual confirmation. I wrote it in my notebook. No mercy. I underlined it. Not as a reminder, as a commitment. I write down things I mean. It is how I know which instructions I intend to follow and which ones I am performing for the room. This one I meant. The room cleared. Owen gathered his notebooks. He looked at my 2 words and the single line beneath them. He looked at me with the careful expression he got when he was about to say something he knew might not land the way he intended. That is understood by most people as a motivational framework, he said. A way of saying bring your full effort. It does not literally mean. I know what it means, I said. He nodded slowly. Right, he said. I think that might be the problem. He was exactly right. He said it as a concern. I received it as a confirmation. That evening I reviewed Shenvareth's file one final time. 3 pages of documented performance, exoskeleton ratings, technique certifications. At the end of the combat history section, no recorded match losses. Stated as data, not accolade, the way you list a mountain's elevation, simply the condition of the thing. I closed the file. I thought about the left shoulder lead, about the thoracic hip junction listed as a reduced flexibility zone, the way you list a footnote, as if footnotes are never the most important text on the page. I checked my bootlaces, left, right. Owen appeared in the dormitory doorway. "Mess is open," he said. "In a minute," I said. He waited. He was good at waiting. "In a minute," I said again. He left. From across the room, Resketh said in her directed voice, "You are preparing." "Yes," I said. "My pack mother says readiness is another name for already committed," she said. I thought about this. "Your pack mother sounds practical," I said. "She raised 7, Resketh said. I almost smiled. I turned off my bunk light and sat in the quiet station dark and let the thinking go quiet and the body come forward. In the morning, there would be a sparring match. I had been given an order. I had written it down and underlined it, and I had meant it when I wrote it. I did not understand then why this was considered unusual. The sparring gym smelled like ozone and prior effort. The floor was layered impact material rated for loads far beyond standard sparring specifications. I noted this the way you note load-bearing structures before you use a room for something. I stretched in the warm-up zone. Regulation sparring gear, force limiter pads on the forearms and shins, a head guard, a communication piece linking to the tap-out monitoring system. The force limiter pads were designed to reduce peak impact transfer. I put them on and ran the required equipment checks. I did not think about the reduction percentage. The gallery above the floor held observers, recruits not in the first evaluation session, seated in the configured risers with the focused attention of people watching something they would need to understand later. Medical personnel at ringside. The Drell aide with his log tablet, already writing. Commander Arith at the gallery rail, hands at her sides, standing with the relaxed alertness of someone expecting to see exactly what she had planned. Shenvareth was warming up 20 meters away. Systematic, every movement deliberate and sequential, the warm-up as first round. His preparation alone told me that he was very good. He looked across the floor at me once. I was checking my laces. The match official reviewed protocol, tap-out system active and monitored, medical standing by. Both parties confirm readiness. Shenvareth confirmed with a formal Velhari gesture, both forearms aligned. "Ready," I said. "The start signal." He led with his left shoulder. I was already not there. I had moved laterally before his leading step completed, not backward away from him, but around the outside edge of his line, because straight withdrawal was what he expected, and I do not give people what they expect when what they expect leads somewhere I do not want to be. He corrected with a speed that surprised me, pivoting faster than his file's reaction time data had indicated. I updated everything I thought I knew about Velhari pivot mechanics in half a second and kept moving. He came in low, exoskeleton weight forward, using the plating's mass as a redirect mechanism. The standard Velhari method: receive the force, redirect it, use the opponent's movement against them. Clean technique, deeply practiced. He had done this thousands of times against opponents who did what the physics of the situation suggested they should do. I did not do what the physics suggested. I changed the angle. He corrected, precise. He was working at the high end of his training and doing it correctly, every adjustment technically sound. He had never been in a match where technically sound adjustments were not enough to manage the situation. He did not know that yet. I could see him not knowing it in the fractions of a second between each correction, the slight recalibration that happens when a solved problem turns out to be a different problem. I moved inside his reach, where the leverage geometry changed, where the exoskeleton's mechanical advantage became an architectural limitation. Because at close range, the plating angles overlapped and large armored structures developed interior blind corridors that smaller structures could occupy without registering as immediate threats. I was not a threat at that position. I was a location. His reach came in. I was below it. He adjusted down. I was not below it anymore. I put my weight into the lateral pressure point at the junction between his thoracic and hip plating sections. The file had listed this as a reduced flexibility zone, in the footnote tone of a minor anatomical notation. He felt the pressure. His center of gravity shifted. He compensated, which was the right response, and the compensation was precise, which was technically excellent, and it moved his weight exactly where the next sequence needed it to be. He was very good. I want to say that clearly and mean it. Every counter he made was correct. Every adjustment was sound. He was fighting at his ceiling, and his ceiling was high. The problem was mine, was somewhere he did not have a measurement for. The gallery went quiet, not the usual quiet of watching a competition. This was a different quality, the quiet of people watching something that had stepped outside the parameters. The floor cracked under one exchange. A seam appeared in the impact material, sharp and clean, running 6 centimeters before stopping. I noted it, kept moving. Shenvareth caught me with a redirected sweep I did not fully avoid, and the contact put my shoulder into the mat hard enough that I heard a sound from the medical station that I categorized and set aside. I came back up. His exoskeleton made a sound. Not an impact sound, an interior sound. A small high resonance traveling outward from the thoracic plating, the sound of a structure reporting its current status to anyone paying attention. I knew that sound, different materials in different contexts, but the same information. He heard it too. I saw it in the half-second pause of his next movement, a recalibration at the margins of his expression, there and gone. I did not use the pause to press. I used it as data. He was operational. His technique remained sound. But something in the shape of the match had shifted, and we both knew it, and neither of us addressed it, and the match continued. 2 more sequences, 3. The exoskeleton spoke again, louder, longer. Shenvareth's hand hit the mat. 3 times, flat and clear. I heard it. I was in the middle of a takedown sequence that had been in motion for 1 full second. Stopping a takedown sequence at the 1 second mark places incorrect torque at the joint points of the structure being moved. Incorrect torque on a crystalline exoskeleton that had just reported its stress levels twice in 30 seconds was a worse outcome than completing the sequence in a controlled way. I completed it in a controlled way. He came down onto the mat with the careful precision of something being placed rather than thrown. I stood. The match had run 31 seconds. Shenvareth was on the mat. He was breathing. His eyes were open. He was entirely and completely in one piece. Two fracture lines were visible across his thoracic plating, running clean along structural seam lines. Not destruction. Information. The floor had a crack in it that had not been there at the start. I looked at the crack. The gallery was not making any sound. The match official was looking at his monitoring equipment with the expression of a person whose instruments were reporting data. His instruments were not designed to report. Commander Areth was at the rail. She was standing very still. Her face had done the thing Drell faces do when a significant, unexpected event requires the mind to catch up to the eyes, the automatic closing down of expression, the features settling into held neutrality while processing happened behind them. I stood at the center mark. I had done what she asked. I had shown no mercy, not to my opponent, not to my own limits. I had taken the order at its full stated value and executed it in 31 seconds. The room was doing a thing I had felt once before. When I was 14 years old in a hollow in the eastern Kentucky hills, standing in the aftermath of something I had done because it was the only thing to do, and the world had gone very quiet around me while it decided what category to put me in. I checked my bootlaces. Left, right. Commander Arith said my name. One word, the flat precision of someone choosing very carefully what to lead with. I turned, stood at attention. She looked at me from the rail. I looked back up at her. She did not speak again. Not yet. She was still deciding what to do with what she had just seen, and she was taking the time she needed to do it correctly. Medical reached Shenvareth. Owen in the gallery had both hands over his mouth. Resketh had gone absolutely still. I stood at attention and waited, and the quiet in the room had weight to it, which was unusual for a station that had been so carefully designed to weigh nothing. The inquiry took 2 days and produced a document that the Academy's legal office later classified as procedurally unprecedented, in a tone that suggested they would have preferred impossible. It began in the debriefing room adjacent to the sparring facility. Commander Arath, the Drell aide, a Velhari observer sent by Shenvareth species military attaché, who sat in the back of the room with the expression of a person who had been told what had happened and was present to confirm that what had actually happened. Arith sat across the table from me and looked at me for a moment before she began. "Are you injured?" she asked. "No, ma'am." She made a note. Shenvareth's exoskeleton sustained 2 Class II structural fractures to the thoracic plate. The medics have confirmed no internal damage. He will be cleared for light activity within the week. "I am glad," I said. Arith looked at me. "Are you?" "Yes, ma'am. I was not trying to." I stopped. I completed the takedown sequence because stopping it mid-motion would have placed improper load on the joint points. Completing it with controlled placement was the lower damage outcome. She wrote something. "Did you hear the tap signal?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "When?" "During the sequence. Before you completed the takedown." "Yes, ma'am." She set her stylus down. She looked at me in the careful, unhurried way of a person asking a question they already know the answer to, and asking it anyway because the asking is the point. "Corporal Voss, when I gave the closing statement before evaluations, when I said show no mercy, what did you understand that to mean?" I thought about it for a moment, then I gave the honest answer. "Exactly what you said, ma'am." Silence, the specific kind that has its own temperature. "Every other recruit in that room," she said, understood that statement as a motivational construct, an instruction to bring full effort, a permission to operate at their training ceiling, not a literal operational directive. "I understand that now," I said. "But you did not understand it then." "No, ma'am." She picked up the stylus. She did not write anything. She turned it between her fingers once. "Why not?" she asked. I thought about how to say what I knew in the language available to me. I am from Harlan County, I said. She waited. It is in eastern Kentucky, on Earth. When someone in a position of authority where I come from tells you to show no mercy, they are not offering encouragement. They are describing the conditions. They mean, this is what the situation requires. This is what will keep you and the people with you intact. Do not look for the softer option because there is not one. Arith looked at me for a long moment. You grew up in a high-demand environment, she said. Not officially, I said, but the land had its own requirements. She made a note, long enough to suggest she was writing more than one thing. The phrase was not intended as a literal operational order, she said. I know that now, I said. The problem, she said, is that you were correct to execute it as one. The word for that is not disobedience. It is not negligence. It is a gap in our shared vocabulary. She closed her tablet. Shenvareth has formally requested a meeting with you, she said. To express concern. To request a second evaluation, she said, when his plating is repaired. I looked at her. He wants to learn something, she said. Whether it is wise or not is a separate question. The inquiry board convened the following morning. Representatives from 4 species military attachés, the Academy's legal office, and the station's medical chief. They reviewed the match recording in a silence that lasted 47 minutes, and then they spent 2 hours attempting to locate the regulation I had violated. They did not find one. I had worn the required gear. I had confirmed readiness. I had responded to the tap-out signal within the bounds the protocol document specified, which allowed for the completion of initiated sequences where stopping mid-motion posed greater injury risk than controlled completion. The match official had confirmed this in his report. I had followed the rules. I had also followed Commander Arith's order. The document they produced was marked advisory, rather than disciplinary, and recommended a review of the orientation briefing's standard closing language for cross-species clarity. I sat in the anteroom during the deliberation with Owen, who had brought 2 of his notebooks and was not writing in either of them. How are you? He asked. Fine, I said. He looked at me. I actually am, I said. Mara, he said carefully, you cracked a Velhari exoskeleton, 2 fracture lines clastu in 31 seconds. I know. That has never happened. That was not in the category of things that happen. I know. And you are fine. Yes, I said. He opened his notebook. He closed it again. I think the part I am struggling with is that you are fine because you did exactly what you intended to do, and what you intended to do was what you were told to do, and the fact that it caused a situation requiring a 2-day inquiry is something you are processing as a paperwork issue rather than as. He stopped. As what? I said. He thought about this for a long time. A signal, he said, that you are operating outside parameters the people around you can predict. I looked at him. I know, I said. Does that concern you? I thought about it genuinely. It concerns me when it surprises them, I said. It would concern me less if they knew what to expect. He wrote something in his notebook. He turned it so I could not see it, but not in a secretive way. In the way of a person writing a private note they are not ready to share yet. Fair enough, he said. That evening, Resketh found me on the bench outside the dormitory level. She sat beside me without asking and was quiet for a while. This was, I understood by now, how she offered company. Not with words first, but with presence, the pack instinct, the fundamental conviction that being with someone and being silent is not absence of comfort. I let her be present. After a while she said, my pack mother would say you fought with ancestor logic. What does that mean? I asked. It means you fought the way things fought before there were rules for fighting, before agreements about what was allowed and what the expected ranges were. She paused. Like the ground fights, without adjustment for who is standing on it. I thought about this. Is that a compliment? I asked. It is a description, she said. Whether it is a compliment depends on what you intend to be. I did not answer that. I did not know the answer yet. We sat in the corridor for a while longer. I checked my bootlaces. In the days that followed, something shifted in the way the station moved around me. Not hostility, not exactly fear. Something more like the careful attention people give to a new variable in a system they thought they had fully mapped. I watched it happen and noted it the way I noted everything, as information, as terrain, as conditions I needed to account for. Shenvareth's exoskeleton was repaired in 5 days. On the 6th, he found me in the training corridor and stood in the same weight-forward posture he had held during orientation. His plating caught the light the same way. His shoulder faced the same direction. "Corporal Voss," he said. "Shenvareth." He was quiet for a moment. "I have reviewed the recording 6 times," he said. "What did you find?" I said. "That I was technically correct in every response I made," he said. "Yes," I said. "And that technical correctness was not sufficient to the situation." "No," I said. He looked at me with the direct attention of someone who had decided to receive information rather than manage impressions. "In 3 combat cycles," he said, "I have never been in a situation where technically correct responses were not enough, where the correct response was still insufficient because the situation had moved beyond the range where responses have correct and incorrect options." "That is what I grew up with," I said. He processed this for a long moment. Then, "I would like to train with you again, under cooperative parameters this time." "Shenvareth," I said, "you cracked." "I know," he said. "I want to understand why, more than I want to preserve the fact that I never had before." I looked at him. He was built like something that had made itself credible through sheer accumulated integrity. And here he was asking the question that most things that had never broken never thought to ask. "All right," I said. We started training together 2 days later. It was Owen who told me, one evening, that the inquiry board's recommendation had been formalized and sent to command. "The standard closing statement," he said. "They are reviewing the language for cross-species translation accuracy." "Good," I said. "Commander Areth submitted a separate addendum," he said. "She wrote that the clarity issue ran in both directions, that the statement had been culturally calibrated for species that use motivational idiom as a primary instructional mode, and that there are individuals for whom motivational idiom does not register as idiom." He looked at his food. "She wrote that the program should consider whether this is a communication failure or an asset that needs different framing." I thought about this. "Asset," I said. "That is what she wrote," Owen said. I checked my laces. 3 weeks later, Commander Arith called me into her office for the first time since the debrief. The office was small and precise, everything in it functional and exactly where it belonged, belonging to a person who had spent a career in environments where efficiency was survival. She sat behind her desk. I sat across from it. We looked at each other for a moment. "There is an assignment," she said. "I am asking you to volunteer for it, asking, not ordering." "What is the assignment?" I said. She laid out the sector designation, the conditions, the prior outcomes. 3 forward recon units, mixed species, experienced and decorated, deployed into a sector with disputed boundary classification and documented tactical volatility. All 3 had returned. None of the 3 had returned intact in the ways that matter. The sector remained unresolved. "Why me?" I said. "Because I need someone who executes literal orders correctly when the situation requires literal execution, and understands when to adjust when it does not," she said. "And I believe you are developing the second part of that at a rate that justifies the investment." She had said this the way she said everything, without tonal variation, which meant every word was equally load-bearing. "Who else is on the unit?" I said. She told me. Resketh, a Drell engineer named Gevrek, prosthetic secondary arm, 3 cycles in contested environment operations, and the Torvali from the orientation bay. the one who had watched me from across the room on the first day and had not looked away first. "Her name is Var," Arith said. "Class 4 origin. She was selected for the same reason you were." I thought about that first moment across the orientation bay, the thing that had moved between us, the recognition without a name. "All right," I said. Arith looked at me. "I want to say something to you," she said, "not as command, as context." I waited. "The closing statement before evaluations," she said. "I have given it at the start of every first evaluation for 6 cycles. Every recruit who has heard it understood it as encouragement. Every recruit. Until you." She paused. I spent a long time deciding whether that was a failure in my communication or a failure in the framing I had always used for the statement. "What did you decide?" I said. "That it was a failure in my understanding of what no mercy actually means to someone who was not trained on it as a phrase," she said. "Someone who was trained on it as a condition." I looked at her. "You did what I said," she said. "Exactly what I said. The gap was mine." There was nothing to say that would improve on what she had just said, so I said nothing. "I will not make the same linguistic error twice," she said. "No, ma'am." She looked at me for a moment more. "So I will not tell you to show no mercy," she said. I waited. "I will tell you to come back." The unit assembled in the docking corridor 2 days later. Resketh, pack carrier efficiently organized, head tilted at the angle that meant she was running a continuous environmental assessment. Gevrek, compact and quiet, prosthetic arm checked and calibrated, carrying the kind of stillness that people develop when they have spent a long time in environments that do not forgive inattention. And Var. She was at the far end of the corridor when I came through the access hatch. Same broad shoulders, same steady stance. She looked at me the same way she had looked at me from across the orientation bay on the first day, direct, without adjustment. I looked back. Owen was there to see us off. He had a notebook. He was not writing in it. He looked at the 4 of us one by one and then at me. "Come back," he said. "That is the order," I said. He almost smiled. I boarded. The pre-launch checklist ran through the intercom. Gevrek had the engineering position and was running system confirmations in the efficient half-verbal way of someone for whom this was deeply familiar. Resketh was in the tactical chair, head tilted, already assessing. Var had taken the forward observation position and was looking through the port glass at the sector ahead. I strapped in. I ran my standard pre-action inventory, gear, position, sightlines, exit options, standard, complete. I checked my boot laces. Var in the forward seat said without turning around, "You lace them tight." "Habit," I said. "Mine too," she said. She held up one boot slightly from the floor, the same instep pressure lacing I used, the same tightness that sits at the edge of comfortable and says, "I am here, I am in this, I know exactly where the ground is." We did not talk for a while after that. The ship lifted from the dock. The station fell away behind us, with its optimized air and its .9 standard gravity and its filtered everything. The sector ahead had no name in any language I spoke and appeared on no map I had been given. Commander Areth had described it as the place where preparation runs out. I looked at it through my side port. It looked a little like home. The sector did not look hostile from a distance. Gevrek told me, as we entered the initial approach corridor, that this was the documented primary deception. The 3 prior units had all noted it in their opening logs. A benign approach signature, low radiation, stable atmospheric readings on the planetary bodies in the sector. What the readings did not capture, because they were designed for standard threat parameters, was the specific quality of silence in the sensor array. Certain frequencies were absent where they should have been present. Gevrek had a name for this kind of absence. He called it prepared quiet. His engineering specialty was hostile environment structure analysis, which meant he had spent 3 cycles learning to read what was not there. "Something knows we are here," he said, without alarm, in the flat voice of a person stating a condition. "Since when?" I asked. Since before we arrived, he said. Var turned from the forward port. They tracked the transit approach vector. Which means they have observation infrastructure in the outer system, Resketh said, which the prior units did not report. The prior units did not return in a reporting condition, Gevrek said. We sat with that for a moment. New protocol, I said. We assume observed from here forward. No further approach concealment because we do not have it. We proceed as if we are known and seen, and we operate accordingly. Resketh looked at me. That is not in the standard forward recon procedure, she said. Standard forward recon procedure did not account for the prior 3 units, I said. Gevrek confirmed green on the engineering board. Var had already turned back to the forward port. Agreed, she said. We dropped to low approach altitude above the second planetary body in the sector, a gray-surfaced world with a thin atmospheric layer and a gravity reading at 1.3 standard. Not comfortable, not impossible. The kind of gravity that reminds you it is there and expects you to remember. The landing zone Arith had designated was a broad flat expanse 2 kilometers south of surface structures that the sector survey had classified as abandoned installation, origin unknown. The 3 prior units had all made contact with those structures. The 3 prior units had marked them as low priority in their logs before the logs stopped. We landed. 1.3 gravity pressed down in a way that felt like the world forming an opinion about us. I checked my boot laces before the hatch opened. Left, right, tight enough to feel the pressure. Var was at the hatch controls. She looked at me over her shoulder. You too, she said. Every time, I said. She checked her own laces, then she opened the hatch. The air outside was thin and carried a mineral quality, cold and slightly metallic, the smell of a place that had been the same temperature for a very long time. The surface was solid under the first step, compressed and dense, 1.3 gravity pulling every footfall down with a deliberateness that my body recognized as the correct amount of weight. I breathed. This felt like something. Resketh emerged beside me and immediately tilted her head, scanning frequencies. Gevrek followed, already running a passive sensor sweep with his kit. Var came last and stepped onto the surface and stood for a moment with her eyes closed, feeling the gravity, and then opened her eyes and looked at me. Heavy, she said. Right amount, I said. She almost smiled. We moved toward the structures. The first kilometer was open ground, visible, known to whoever was watching. We moved in the formation Resketh suggested, spread wide enough that a single targeting solution could not cover the group, but close enough for direct communication. No shortcuts, no concealment that was not there. We were 4 people walking across an observed plane toward structures that had neutralized 3 prior military units, and we were doing it with our eyes open and our heads clear. The structures were low, built into the surface rather than above it, the way things are built when the surface is friendlier than the sky. Material composition read as native geology on the first passive pass. On the second pass, Gevrek identified evidence of internal modification, voids shaped by something with intent rather than erosion. Someone built into what was already here, he said. Not new construction, adaptation. Efficient, Var said. And careful, I said. They did not want to change the surface profile. Which means they did not want to be noticed, Resketh said, until they had already been encountered. We stopped 20 meters from the nearest structure entry point. The entry was not concealed. It was simply present, a gap in the surface material 2 meters wide and 1.8 tall, opening into an interior that passive sensors read as larger than the surface footprint suggested. The gap was the right size for the species that had built this structure to pass through. It was also the right size for us, which told me that the builders were either similarly proportioned or had done their research. Neither option was comfortable. The prior units entered, Gevrek said. Yes, I said. Their logs go quiet within the structure. Yes, I said. Resketh was scanning the frequency space inside the structure opening. "There are signals in there," she said. "Low band, below standard detection range." "Communication?" I asked. "Passive," she said, "like something waiting." I stood at the entry and looked into the interior dark, and felt the specific quality of attention that comes from a space that is not empty. "What do you want to do?" Var asked. I thought about Commander Arith's order, the only order she had given me that was not subject to translation error. "Come back." Not proceed at all costs, not complete the objective regardless, not show no mercy, come back. A statement about priorities, a description of what mattered most in the final accounting. "We do not enter the structure," I said. Var looked at me. "That is not what prior units did," she said. "Prior units did not come back," I said. "We set full-spectrum passive monitoring at the perimeter, collect what we can collect without committing to an environment we cannot exit at will, and we bring the data back to command. That is the mission. The mission is the data, not the structure." Resketh said, "The assignment brief listed the structure as the primary objective." "The assignment brief was written by people who did not know what was in the structure," I said. "We have information the brief did not have. We use it." Gevrek had been running his passive sensor work during this exchange. Without looking up from his kit, he said, "The 3 prior units entered the structure. None of them transmitted from inside it. The recovery logs from the returning members documented altered judgment parameters, an increased inclination toward further commitment, a reduced assessment of risk." "It makes you want to go deeper," Var said. "Yes," Gevrek said. We stood at the entry and did not enter. I had stood at thresholds before. The specific quality of this one, the threshold that offers the feeling of answers inside it of completion just beyond the visible range, this was a familiar shape. The hills at home had places like this. Hollow ground, old shafts, terrain that looked like it went somewhere and pulled you toward the going. My grandfather had told me, the pull is the danger, not the destination. The pull means the ground wants something from you. You decide what to give it. I turned my back to the entry. "Perimeter monitoring," I said. "Full-spectrum passive 2-hour collection, then we go back." No one argued. We set up the monitoring array at the perimeter and then moved back 50 meters and sat in the 1.3 gravity and waited. Resketh ran her continuous frequency scan. Gevrek watched the sensor readout with focused calm. Var sat beside me in the gray mineral cold and looked at the structures. After a while she said, "I wanted to go in." "I know," I said. "Did you?" I thought about it honestly. "For about 4 seconds," I said. "Then I thought about the order." "Come back," she said. "Come back," I said. She was quiet for a while. "My people have a phrase," she said, roughly. "The ground that tests you is not trying to end you. It is trying to find out what you are." She looked at the structure entry. "I think I understand what this ground is trying to find out." "What?" I said. "Whether we know what we are already," she said. "Whether we need it to tell us." I sat with this in the mineral cold. "We do not need it to tell us," I said. "No," she said, "we do not." The 2-hour collection completed. Gevrek broke down the monitoring array with practiced efficiency. Resketh confirmed signal capture across all passive frequency bands. We had data, more data than any prior unit had transmitted from this sector, because we had collected from outside rather than going in and being changed by going in. We walked back across the open ground to the landing zone, 1.3 gravity on every step, pressing down with the seriousness I understood as respect. The world had requirements. We had met them. We lifted. The sector fell away below us through the port glass. Gevrek was already at the communications board, preparing the data burst for transmission to Arith. He worked quietly and completely, and when he was done he said, "Transmitted," in the flat voice of task completion. Resketh checked her frequency logs. She looked up once at me and said nothing, which from her was a considerable amount. Var in the forward seat said, "Does it always feel like that?" Like what? I said. Like you are holding your position against a current while you are looking straight into it, she said. Yes, I said. Is that what home is like? She said. I thought about the ridgelines in October, about the way hollow ground sounded underfoot, about weather that had not made up its mind yet. Home is the thing that made us capable of holding against the current, I said. That is the difference. Var was quiet for a long time. I will have to think about that, she said. So will I said. We ran the return route at standard transit speed. The sector disappeared behind us. The Korath system came back into the sensors, and then the station in its fixed orbital position, the place that optimized everything and pushed back on nothing, the place that felt like floating. Docking approach was routine. Owen was at the bay when the hatch opened. He had a notebook. He was not writing in it. He looked at the four of us one by one, with the focused attention of a person confirming something he had hoped was true. You came back, he said. That was the order, I said. He closed his notebook and put it in his pocket. I know, he said. I am still glad. I stepped out onto the station deck. .9 standard gravity received me with its usual polite insufficiency. I almost fell up. I checked my bootlaces. Left, right, tight enough to feel the pressure, tight enough to know exactly where the ground was. Fine. Behind me, Var stepped out and checked hers. Resketh was speaking quietly to Gevrek in the corridor, going over the frequency log readout together. The data was in Arith's system and the mission was done, and what came next was above my rank to decide, and that was all right. That was as it should be. Owen fell in beside me as we walked the dock corridor toward the main level. What was it like? He said. I thought about the 1.3 gravity and the mineral cold and the entry that pulled like a question you were not ready to answer. I thought about four people standing at a threshold and deciding what to give it. I thought about the prepared quiet in the sensor array and the thing inside the structure that wanted us to want to go further. It knew we were there, I said. He walked beside me and did not ask what that meant, because he was learning by now which answers were finished and which ones were still open. This one was still open. All the best ones are.